Hi everybody, Gary Gomley from FAB Solutions. And I had an amazing conversation with Natalie Lewis from Dynamic HR Services recently. And she shared some thoughts on communication in furlough, how to return from furlough, and some top tips. And the video is on YouTube. So if you want to look at the whole video, it's around 45 minutes. You can have a look on the FAB Solutions YouTube page. But I thought I'd just give you some snippets, a little download of some of the top tips. Natalie Lewis, HR industry expert. Hope you enjoy.
I had a question around furloughing, and this is probably one that you've had a million different questions around. And it's understanding what the responsibility is on the employer to stay in contact with their employees whilst they're furloughing. And I think there's probably a lot of business owners out there thinking, how much communication can I have? Because they're technically not working for me. So do they have any responsibility? So how is that being felt in your in the clients and the people that you work with?
I think it's really important to have that communication. Obviously, just to bear in mind that when you furlough someone, they shouldn't be doing any work for you, full stop, right? So any of the tasks that they would normally carry out on a day-to-day basis, they should not be doing. They should not be checking emails. They should not be taking calls from clients, customers, or whatever. What I would normally do is, or what I have been doing with clients is start asking them to set up like a one day a week where they just zoom in, or they call every employee and they're giving them a set day, set week, set time, just to check in and say, how are you getting on? The thing that you can do is, if that person has retains knowledge or information or passwords, or there's some sort of continuity where they've got a relationship with buyers or sellers or clients, a manager can ring them up and ask them for information on that particular issue or whatever it might be. They themselves cannot physically, carry out the work, basically. Yeah. So I think it's really important that people or employees who are on furlough, understand that they might be called up and asked to, answer questions for business continuity reasons. But also, I think it's nice to have that contact point as well. So whether you decide, and it's up to you to decide how you contact your employees during this time. Email's cool, that's fine. If they're happy with contact, having a chat with you through email, that's fine. Personally, I prefer a call, so they can just, sort of pop in to have a, even if it's 10-15 minute call. This is what's happening in the business. This is how long we think that you're going to be furloughed for. Have you got any questions? Have you got any concerns? That kind of thing. Only needs to be 10-15 minute check-in. We don't need to have war and peace. And yeah, just keep it going, because I think one of the things that I think which people are missing a trick on is that when we get back to normality, whatever's going to be in a new normal. Yeah, exactly. And people are going to have to get back, running again. They're going to have to hit the ground running once they come off furlough. And you know what it's like when you've been away for like 2 weeks, even on holiday. You can't remember your password, you can't remember your login details. You're like, oh my god, what's going on? And you've got like brain fog for at least 2 or 3 days by the time you get back. And this is what's going to happen when people come back off furlough. So we need to be thinking about that and how to combat and how to get around that. And I think that constant, having some sort of constant, not necessarily constant, sorry, but that
consistent level of checking.
Yeah, consistent communication. Yeah, even up at a weekly, maybe fortnightly basis, will certainly help with that.
Is there any obligation in furlough for the employee to stay in touch, or to make time to stay in communication with their employer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what you have to remember is that they are still employed, and all of the terms and conditions within their contract still apply, other than the fact that they are on furlough. So whilst they're not carrying out work, they still have got obligations to comply with whatever the business needs from them. So, for example, being available if there's a question about one of their clients or the project that we're working on, or whatever it is. So yeah, there is an obligation there. What I would advise is that kind of thing is written into the agreement. or at least it doesn't need to be written into an agreement, but you need to be communicated to say, you know, please be available if we need it. Yeah, exactly. Just share those expectations. This is a really good time because whilst people are on furlough, it's a really good time for them to be doing training or personal development and things like that. So I think, you know, I've got clients of mine who are rewarding their staff for doing those sort of things. If you can prove that you've done some personal development or you've done some training, then, you know, sort of bonuses in place or sort of little, you know, gifts and caveats, you know, sort of little vouchers and stuff that people can get for doing that. And I think that's a really nice way of keeping people motivated and engaged. And also if they're doing stuff that keeps their mind active, whether it's personal development or, you know, extra training, then it will help them to get back into the workplace a lot quicker.
Because you can get really lost in the here and now to say, right, we need everybody furloughed. Actually, the reality of it, they can do training and they can do development whilst they're in furlough. I think that's been a misconception sometimes, that if you're furloughed, you can't do anything. Actually, we can. So it's thinking about what you can do in the here and now.
There are some caveats around it, and I would suggest that anyone wanting their staff to do sort of like standard training or actual take qualifications, they need to just get separate advice on that one, because there may be a point in time where they actually have to take that as being more like work. So you've got to be careful with it, but certainly people can work on their self-development and they can work on soft skills and that kind of thing. If it's a proper qualification, there is a little bit of the advice is unclear at the moment, and it may be that it'd have to come off furlough and be paid 100% of their wages for that time. So there may be some jiggery pokery to do with that. If you definitely need someone to go through like a qualification, let's say, I don't know, like food tech qualification or something, or a first aid qualification or whatever, and those can be done online, by the way, now. It may be that you have to pay them to do that and pay them a full wage, but certainly where it comes to developing soft skills or developing themselves, then yeah, they're good to go on that whilst they're being furloughed.
I think it's important, and I'd be interested in your views to say, because what a lot of businesses have done, they've created the exit plan for furlough. Do you think it's advisable for organisations to start thinking about what the re-entry is back for employees, and what are the top things that you think they should be considering when they're bringing people back?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So now that most of my clients have furloughed their employees, or they've only got key workers, like key workers for them, not the key workers as in like NHS people, but you know, their key workers working on keeping the business going. We've already started putting those plans in place. So it is things like having and it's also going to be stuff that we can use to future-proof as well, because I think, you know, we don't know, this is not going to happen. Hopefully this sort of thing will never happen again, but if it does, I think it's shown
fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I think this has shown there's been a lot of areas of weakness in businesses. Now, a lot of my clients work to my sort of foundations, what I call sort of foundations of success. And a lot of my clients have already got these covered off, certainly the retained clients, the people that I work with on a regular basis. But the things like having manuals and system and operation processes in place, so that if anything happens to somebody, God forbid, you know, or something like this happens, there's a manual in place for somebody else to come in, pick up and still be able to carry out that job role without sort of stifling people, because that's what I don't want to happen. There's still sort of a standard operation procedure that most people will go through. Like, you know, I had a client, a sort of a pay-as-you-go client I haven't worked with for a while, come to me and ring me last week and said, our payroll lady's being furloughed and we don't know how to run payroll. I was like, oh God, seriously? So I was like, right, okay. Have you got a manual in place? No, we haven't. Oh, right, okay. So it was about sort of working through that with them. But I think it's really interesting because that showed them that they've got some quite big holes in their systems and processes. And certainly that's one of the things that I would be working on, is once people are back up and running, or are running now, not furloughed, but maybe haven't got as much work to do as they normally would, is to start putting manuals together. How do you run a job? You know, how do you run payroll? How do you do whatever it is in your business, so that you've got those things together, and that really helps with business continuity. I think it's about sort of starting to think about how you're going to reintroduce people back into the workplace, back into that routine, because we'll all have got into weird routines, albeit, you know, or maybe you want to consider, actually, do we want to go back to the office? Are we okay, you know, working remotely for those people who want to? It's about looking also at, you know, pivoting things like, you know, your services and your products, and the way that you recruit and the way that you retain people. All of those things can be thought about, because I think what we're going to find out if things get back to normal, or whatever the new normal is that people are going to have really felt the strain over the last few months. Okay, they'll be poor and they'll be pissy, and they will not be happy people generally, unless they've been looked after really well. And I think, you know, that's when we're going to have a lot of claims and a lot of dissatisfaction to deal with. And it's about looking at how we can treat our people, like humans, you know, human interaction going forward, and making sure that we treat people as individuals. Because you know what, society was changing before this ever happened, but it really has changed now, and what people want from their jobs has changed. What people want from, you know, their daily life has changed. You know, we're all talking about the fact that we want more, you know, time to ourselves and all of these different things. So if we can start looking at how to integrate that into businesses going forward, that will ultimately make them more resilient.
It's been brilliant chatting to you. Is there any kind of key takeaways that you'd suggest employers look at, just as a brief summary for people, just to, while we're there and while you're here? Is there any top tips that you could share?
Okay, so whilst we're going through this, you know, pandemic, I think communication got to be, do your best for your client, your customer. Sorry, do your best for your employees. Do your best for your customers and your consultants and the people that you work with. It is really important that we keep money moving within businesses. So even if you have got a consultant that you work with regularly and you're considering saying, listen, we need to pause your you know, your services, please reconsider even just paying them a little bit to keep doing a little bit of work, whether it's marketing, whether it's HR, whatever it might be, whether it's, you know, IT, payroll, whatever, your accountant. Let's keep money moving. Really important to look after employees. The better that you treat your employees now, the fewer claims and the more goodwill that you will generate, even if, should the worst happen, you have to make redundancies and those sort of things. So, you know, if you've laid off staff, if you've made them redundant, reconsider taking them back on furlough if you can, if you tick the eligibility criteria. We need to plan now. We need to plan now for going back into, you know, normality, the new normal. So start planning, start getting things into place, so that when you can get up and running, you can hit the ground running, and then future-proof for things going wrong again. So make sure you've got your manuals in place. Make sure that you've got, you know, you're cross-skilling people. So that means, like, where maybe you have one person that can do one job in the organisation, make sure there's other people in the organisations that can sort of partly do that job, or some of the job, or all of the job. So cross-skill, upskill as many people as possible to be able to do this, you know, key jobs within your business, even if that's not what they carry out on a day-to-day basis. At least they've got an understanding, and then look to look at different ways of working. Let's get some more flexibility in, maybe consider a 4-day working week. And that doesn't mean that you have to close your business on one day. That just means that you stagger your staff in, who's in on the days. You can still run Monday to Friday, or Monday to Saturday, whatever it might be. And yeah, I think it's about looking at the ways that we work these days. You know, we need to be looking at what we can do better, what we can do differently, but keep your staff in mind. Not all about business, it's about your staff, because they are your key asset.
Some fantastic tips there. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you very much for sharing the time and sharing the wisdom that's coming out of all this as well. There's some really great pearls of wisdom there that you've shared, and I really appreciate you sparing the time. And hopefully it won't take a pandemic for us to catch up and chat again. We'll carry on.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. And hopefully it won't just take a pandemic for people to start looking at business differently.
Definitely.
There you go.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Lovely chatting to you, Natalie. Take care. Speak to you soon.
Cheers. Bye.